Welcome to Founders Future, a podcast powered by Closers.io, where we explore the journeys of innovative entrepreneurs and the road ahead for them and their companies. I'm your host, Milan Kohut, and in each episode, we uncover the stories behind impactful ventures, the challenges faced, the lessons learned, and the strategies fueling future growth. Today, I'm absolutely thrilled to be joined by Josh Thompson, the founder of Kindred Coaching, where they guide founders and sales leaders through high performance coaching, and also the co founder of WorkSelf, a platform blending productivity tools with mental health support for driven professionals. Their approach stands out through Kindred's focus on rapid mindset shifts that have helped clients double revenue in months, drawing from their own transition from corporate sales to building multiple ventures. With that being said, Josh, let me officially welcome you to Founders Future.
Yeah, appreciate it, man.
It's great to have you on the podcast. We're going to jump into the conversation. What I love to do with every single one of my guests is a little bit of traveling back in time, right? So before you even had this company, what were you doing before? And then eventually, what was the motivation for starting the business?
Yeah, so a few years ago, I worked for an innovation agency, and I was lucky enough, I think, to get exposed to a lot of things that probably people at my age, at my seniority level, wouldn't have gotten exposed to. Things like business model canvassing, like looking at how the internal structure of a company works, being close to strategic decisions. And this was my first corporate job, essentially. I was, fresh to the wide world. I was looking around, what is this world made of? How do I move through it? And I was being privy to all of these discussions that were really impactful from a business angle. And so I think that was my first taste of entrepreneurship and ownership and agency and understanding how those things can really drive you and motivate you. And it wasn't until a fair few years later that I kind of found my confidence and eventually embarked on this journey of entrepreneurship, which, if anyone has been through it, knows that it's an emotional roller coaster. And I think one of the biggest lessons learned across, from starting from that wide-eyed, what I would call a kid back then, and then kind of coming to a bit more of a mature perspective, is there's such a foundation of resilience that you need on this journey. Um, so yeah, I moved through this journey through an innovation agency. I had my own life coaching practice for a time where I kind of worked through what my personal style was, how I like to support people. And then I also moved to London, which was another kind of big major life milestone and kind of changed the trajectory of my path. And as I came here, I got connected with Lions, which is the big advertising association. They have the advertising festival every year. They were great. I was working on their digital learning products, and it kind of just got me to thinking of, you know, what is it about my approach and my curiosity, my love for learning? What is it that could really benefit people? And so these are kind of like the twin ideas that spawned these sort of two different projects that I work on, Kindred Coaching on one hand, and WorkSelf on the other hand. So that's sort of like a whistle-stop tour of my career journey.
Yeah, I see that for you, as well as other business owners, entrepreneurs, the journey is not linear. A lot of pivoting here, a lot of adjustments as you go. But also, I gotta say, hats off to you for even recognizing in the first place that there's something more for me, right? There's something else that I can do, something where I can really follow the passion and really stay curious. I love that idea, by the way. But maybe we can dive into this later. But in this part of the podcast, what I want to pivot to is basically get the listeners close to understanding, first of all, who it is exactly that you're trying to help right now, but also what are the core offerings that you have in place for your clients. So tell us all about that.
Yeah, for sure. I think I'm going to focus a little bit more on WorkSelf in this conversation. This is the venture that has been kind of most recently taking up a lot of my time, a lot of my focus, and a lot of my brain power. And I think there's such an opportunity for consumer side tech that focuses on career development. If you think of, I don't know what your career journey has been like, but if you think of classically any sort of tech that relates to and helps people accelerate their careers, oftentimes it's deployed by human resources teams through organizations. It's institution side, right? And the reason that that happens is because entrepreneurs, I think a lot of the time, are like, well, who has the money? institutions do. So I'm going to go there because it's safe. And I think with WorkSelf, we wanted to take a bit of a different approach. I think we still have elements of the business that have sort of an institutional focus, but primarily we're trying to empower people all along their career journey, giving them the tools that they need to succeed in what, is no doubt one of the most disruptive points ever in human history as it has to do with work. You know, uh, I'm sure you've had people come on this podcast before and talk about artificial intelligence and how it's touching pretty much every single industry across the world in
Mm.
multiple different ways, accelerating things very quickly and sometimes in ways that are unexpected, kind of pulling out the rug of many graduate level jobs that are now just being replaced by artificial intelligence. Because before, where you had people hands on keyboard tapping away, now you can have one person managing 10 keyboards at a time. And that happens faster than it did before. And so I think that the pain that we're trying to dig into here and that we're trying to solve for is that there's not a lot of support resources for people who are in career transition from a consumer side. And so we want to give them the tools back. We want to give them the power back and empower them to pursue work that works for them and to help them ultimately thrive.
Beautiful. Now, for some of the listeners that may not be that familiar with who you are or the company, when you say give them the power back and give them the tools to work with, what do you have in mind specifically?
Yeah, so our approach, I think, is quite holistic, and I know some people kind of are scared of that word because it kind of has this wellness, this woo-woo, um, this connotation attached to it. But I think a holistic approach from our point of view, from a work self point of view, is how do we integrate the different aspects of your life that you already kind of experience day to day, bring them into a central place, and then accelerate them. So some of the key aspects of WorkSelf are, first of all, we have a digital platform, and this has things like career tools, so spanning the works from all the way from, you know, optimizing your CV to really digging into identity. Who am I at work? How do I work? Who do I work best with? And where do I want to go in the future? Because these are questions that a lot of people are asking themselves now. And oftentimes they have to rely on friends, relatives, their communities, which is good, but it only gets you so far. So we have this
Mhm.
element of a digital platform. Alongside that, to kind of support you in that journey, we also offer physical ritual kits, which are about creating intentional daily habits that can help you reset in like your day and to help accelerate your career through sort of an intention and mindfulness-based interventions. So we have now two elements. We have a digital element, we have a physical element, and the last element is relational. So we're an AI company, and it's pasted all over the website. You can see we're an AI company, but ultimately we believe in human coaching. And it's not AI versus the coaches, it's AI and the coaches. How can we help accelerate coaching? And how can we help accelerate individuals? And so part of our offering is helping people connect with coaches that are going to help them make a longer term impact and really execute on the plans that they're kind of developing with our software.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And I also gotta agree with you. Today it's all about AI though. Like we talk about this every single day, and with the amount of technological advancements that you see on a weekly basis and daily basis at this point, it's just ridiculously fast. Right. So I feel like
Yes.
having this like human-centric focus, it's gonna help out a ton. So I love that. But I also want to ask you something else though, because if I remember correctly, the better part of the last 5 or 6 years, your main focus was the Kindred Kindred Coaching, right? That was the name of the company, correct?
Actually, that was a relatively new development. So that's only been sort of around for the last 9 or so months. It was after I exited from Lions. My contract expired, and I was asking myself at the time, what do I want to do next? What feels like me? Where can I add value? And with Kindred, I think the idea there was how do we relate to each other in corporate spaces? And funnily enough, this actually has a ton to do with WorkSelf as well, in terms of
Hmm.
that career acceleration and that relational piece. But how do we accelerate teams in an effective way? And the novelty of the approach with Kindred Coaching is around using the device of narrative role play. So I don't know if you've ever, tried things like Dungeons and Dragons or Call of Cthulhu or some of these sort of role-playing experiences. While as I was going through my coaching qualification in the UK, I was like, this is a no-brainer. These things
Mhm.
that we're practicing every day through talking, through actions, through what many would call pretending, is actually just practicing. It's rehearsal for the things that we want to do and execute in our lives. And so I was
Mhm.
really fascinated by this concept of active practice in a psychologically safe environment. And actually, a lot of those concepts we bring over into WorkSelf and kind of create this space for people who are evolving in their careers to have that space to practice, to have that space to try, to explore. And it's a space that oftentimes you don't get because when do you do this? Maybe 1 year in high school, or your guidance counselor comes around and says, what do you want to be when you grow up? We don't have these spaces. So I think, a lot of my career between Kindred and in WorkSelf is about creating those spaces for people to explore themselves and then to grow within themselves.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad that I asked you that question, and thank you for correcting me. I don't know why, but for some reason I thought that you've been running this project for a lot longer than about 9 months. But also, let me ask you this. I want to look at this from the business perspective. And there is a lot of people listening to this podcast right now who are maybe on the crossroads of whether I should follow one project or follow my other passions or something like that. And this is really interesting to me just to see that you've been focusing your time mainly on the previous project. Now you're saying most of your time is actually taken by the new project, right? So with WorkSelf, I'm just curious, what pivoted for you? What was that shift that made you feel like, okay, I'm actually going to move on and really give this all of my time to build this platform instead of my consulting or coaching business? What was the thought process on that?
Yeah, I think I was in a position about maybe 4 months ago or so where I found myself at this very same crossroads that your listeners might be at, which is I have a lot of things going on in my life. I have tons of ideas, tons of things that I could pursue, but there's 24 hours in the day, and that is a fact. And unfortunately, that's not going to change anytime soon.
Mhm.
So it got to a point where I was like, how am I dedicating my energy and what kind of impact can I have within that 24-hour period? And so when I was kind of doing the calculation in my head, reflecting on my experiences with my own business and then with this business that I've co-founded, the question that kept coming up was one of impact. How do I want to impact people? Where do I want my impact to be? And how can I best use my time to accelerate and to execute that? And the answer was very clear, is that I think I could do a great job continuing to coach teams and experiment in that space and create an impact in that way. But with WorkSelf, I can reach thousands, potentially millions of people. And that multiplier of impact, I think, was a no-brainer for me. If I can reach that amount of people and help people in a way
Mm,
that I think is really valuable, then I'm going to do it. I'm a helper type. That's my sort of reason to be. And so, I had to look at that calculation and really seriously evaluate how am I going to spend my energy? And I settled on, well, let's try this venture and, put my time and effort into creating something new, something that I think people need, and especially at
mhm.
this time of disruption. And let's see where that could go.
That makes a lot of sense. So you basically did have that conversation with yourself and you thought about the scalability of one project against the other one, but the impact that you want to have on people, that one. But also when it comes to WorkSelf, it is a platform. And it's also a subscription model. It's a low ticket product. So you're basically opening yourself up to a lot of opportunities in serving more people who maybe are not really in a position to purchase your services or invest in you as their full-blown coach. Is that the thought process behind it?
I think to a degree, yes. When it comes to the WorkSelf subscription, so part of the package that we offer is it's an annual subscription, and part of that
Mhm.
annual subscription is one session with a coach, of which I am one of the coaches on the platform. So it's almost like people can actually get a taste of the kind of transformational work that I bring to my coachees in my practice through that process. But it also allows me the flexibility to kind of create a more value-driven ecosystem of other coaches as well who might have similar or different approaches to kind of multiply the impact that we can have on society as a whole. And I think one of the kind of consistent themes with a lot of consulting work is you get to work on really interesting projects. You get to move through different kind of organization types, get to meet a lot of different people, but ultimately your impact is limited to a degree to the projects that you're working on, the 10 things that you can manage to do in a year, whatever that looks like. Whereas with a digital platform, the amount of people that you can touch is just infinitely exponentially higher. And so in that sense, I think it was much easier for me to make that decision when I framed it in those terms.
Yeah. Talking about the impact and the amount of people that you can really reach with this project, I'm also curious, what is the thought process or the idea behind the marketing strategy that you have in place? In other words, what is it that you do specifically on the front of lead generation and your marketing to make all of this happen and grow the platform?
Yeah, I think with any sort of consumer side product, you marketing is the biggest driver of success. If you look at any like major successful like CPG brands, for instance, they pour a ton of money into marketing. And I remember as a kid, like growing up with like lots of toy ads between, the classic school programming where you'd be watching, SpongeBob SquarePants, and then you'd have like a Mastermind ad or like a Lego ad, and your 10-year-old brain is like, oh my. So, any sort of consumer side product is going to be heavily reliant on marketing. And I think some of the things that we're trying to do a bit differently is one, having more of a focus on physical activations and events and inviting people into spaces that we create in order for them to kind of get a sense of, okay, what is WorkSelf trying to do? Who are they? How are they supporting people? What's their because while I think advertising digitally is fantastic and it's something that we do as well, there is no replacement for that. And people are craving connection. It's something that I think is a lost art to have that space to hold that space for other people and to facilitate those connections and the building of community. So I think that's one aspect of what we do. And then another aspect is, creating really value-driven content. So creating content that allow people who are reading those pieces to go and do something with it. And that is really the work self philosophy. Go do something. You have the
Yeah.
skills. We're giving you the tools. Go do something, go make something, go be something. And so I
Just
think
take action. Yeah.
exactly, yeah. So the content strategy, I think, is a lot around, providing value to people and building community.
Beautiful. I very much love the way this is evolving. So good for you. Beautiful project. Josh, before we wrap this up, I also what I mentioned at the beginning of on the podcast, or maybe even as we were having a conversation before we even hit record, was the fact that what I love about these conversations is the ability to not only share the exciting stuff, but also the not so good stuff, which is also a part of the business. So I want to ask you, obviously there's a lot of ambition that you have for this project and also several different ideas that you want to explore. But when you think about growing this project and scaling beyond what you've already achieved, out of everything, what would you say is going to be the biggest challenge to make it happen?
This is a misused term on my part, but I like to kind of imagine this glass ceiling. The glass ceiling is often applied to, especially like women in leadership, where they, kind of hit a point and can't progress further. The glass ceiling, as I'm imagining it, is applying to consumer products that have yet to kind of really take hold in the market. and you're fighting up like against the biggest players in the industry, the biggest competitors who have millions in marketing budgets, who can do things faster, better, they have way more resources. And if they wanted, they could look at you witheringly and probably squash you. And so I think that's a really vulnerable place to be as a small business, as a growing kind of, entrepreneurship project is to be in that position of, okay, how do we get people on our side? How do we reach people? How do we, get funding? How do we get into market? And this idea of the glass ceiling, I think for me, is that you can see the end result. You can look up into the sky and you can see the sky, you can see the clouds, you can see the shapes, and you can see how things might look in the future. And yet there's this transparent barrier between you and that state and where you want to be. And this is the idea of the glass ceiling. And, until you can break through that, you're always kind of going to feel like, okay, well, I could be doing more. I could be pushing harder. I need to kind of continue iterating, continue experimenting to get where I want to go. And one of the ways I think, maybe this is more than you bargained for, but one of the ways that I have to imagine this challenge for myself is that every day that you show up to work consistently is another building block of your tower to break through that glass ceiling. It's another rung on the ladder. And there are some rungs that are going to be sturdier and more effective stepping stones than others. But at the end of the day, it is really consistently showing up every day, continuing to push and continuing to look up, because ultimately that's where the goal is, right? It's in the stars, it's in the clouds. So yeah, staying focused on the end goal and fighting that mental battle is really tough as an early founder. But it's also probably one of the most rewarding things that you can do.
Yeah. Josh, I typically ask my guests at the end of the podcast to share some wisdom and advice, but as you were answering my question, you managed to do that at the same time. So I love that. And I just want to say this has been an incredible conversation, and I really want to say thank you for taking the time today, sharing the story with the audience with me. I appreciate it. If anybody from the listeners wanted to reach out, get in touch, maybe even work with you, what is the best way to go about it?
Yeah, absolutely. You can connect with me on LinkedIn at Josh Thompson Prasad. If you just look up my name in LinkedIn, I'm sure it'll pop up. And then I have two websites. Kindred Coaching is my coaching practice, and then I also have WorkSelf.com, which is my current entrepreneur project.
Beautiful. Thank you again, Josh. Now, to our
Amazing. Thank you so
listeners,
much.
I appreciate you being here, man. Thank you. Listeners, if today's conversation inspired you as well, make sure to subscribe to Founders Future on your favorite platform. And also, if you're a business owner, more specifically a coach, consultant, or you have an agency, and you're trying to scale the business and really enhance both your sales and marketing efforts, also visit closers.io, get in touch with our team, and discover how exactly we scaled our company from zero to over 30 million per year in less than 3 years. Until then, keep on crushing it, and I'll see you on the next one.